Well, hi there. This is one of those rare instances where the title might not fit the subject especially well. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We're going to be talking about process, and we're going to be talking about um, analysis paralysis, and we're going to be talking about something that I'd like to call a client path. Um, And I'll explain all of that as we move along. It's the 25th of June, 2021. I'm going to probably identify this in mitchschneidersworld.com as the July column, or what I'd like to write about in July, although I think this will be revisited and expanded upon at some point. But I'm not sure about that quite yet. If you read the misfirebook.com site blog entitled Leased Not Owned, um, it's the result of this column, although it has nothing to do with it, ostensibly. It doesn't match any of the topics. However, it's what came out of being paralyzed, being stuck, not being able to write about what I wanted to write about, and consequently failing to write anything at all until I finally got myself together enough to just start writing. And because I've learned over the years, over almost 40 years of writing, that when you get writer's block, or when you're unable to write, the best thing you can do to clear that up is to write. And sooner or later, whatever it is that's blocking you, whatever it is that's taking up space in your subconscious, will either move or be pushed out of the way so that your subconscious can say what it needs to say. In this case, that was leased not owned. But it got me writing, and it allowed me to finish that piece and then revisit this one. So, in a really convoluted, odd kind of a way, this was responsible for lease not owned, and lease not owned is responsible for if at first you don't succeed. And that's appropriate. That title is appropriate because I kept banging my head against the wall trying to get something written that would even remotely fit what it was I was trying to say. And that in and of itself is a really interesting subject. It has to do with work that's being done on what's referred to generally as a patient path. The patient path is simple enough to understand. It's recognizing all of the different human interactions that occur between a patient, a family member, or a caregiver, and a medical institution, a doctor, a hospital, a doctor's office, or a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant, or a registered nurse, or the custodian in the hallway, or somebody in the cafeteria. And the critical issue there is that by understanding those different cut points, those different places where people slam into each other, you can start to understand what can be done about ensuring that those interactions are positive and not negative. And obviously, I'm interested in that in and of itself because that's what I'm involved in. That's what I'm working on right now. But I'm also interested in it because of its parallel application to something like the repair community, the automotive service aftermarket industry. Shop owners like me, or shop owners like I was, and motorists who are customers or clients somewhere, anywhere. And it's important to understand that relationship, especially in a service business, because there's so much writing on it. There's so much that depends on a positive outcome. So it's imperative, in fact, that you identify whatever bright spots there are, whatever places there are for success and whatever dark corners there are where failure can occur all too easily most times. So that's what I decided to write about here. And inadvertently, I wound up talking about process because it's hard to talk about all these different interactions, all these different clashes and meetings of people as they're working their way through a situation, especially a situation that can be very positive or very negative, that you understand where those dark corners and bright spots are. But it's also important that you understand process and the nature of that movement, how it happens, what it's all about, especially in automotive repair industry, because there are really two processes that are occurring at the same time. The first has to do with the motorist, the customer or client, or potential client, and the service facility. And the second has to do with the vehicle and its journey through the shop. So I started to write about that, and I realized, I remembered the importance of diagramming, that pathway, making sure that you understood it, mapping it, diagramming that service flow chart. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see this especially well, but we'll give it a try. I included it in the blog post, but I'm not sure how well it'll show up because the resolution wasn't that great. And I'm working on that. I'll try and figure it out later on. But let me give you an example of what we're talking about, because it's the same example that I used in the blog post. And it's not comprehensive. And I know that sounds strange, talking about something that you're writing about and you think is important enough for other people to understand, and then sharing the fact that it's not comprehensive. It almost doesn't make any sense. But the entirety of the service process is so great that it's critically important to break it down. Otherwise, it's overwhelming. And I'll give you a good example of that. I didn't include all of the marketing, word of mouth, web presence, social media that it takes to get somebody interested and aware enough of your facility to even want to make a phone call and make an appointment. I started with the initiation of that service event itself. So that would normally start with a call or a chat on the phone, or in some cases by somebody actually just dropping in. If somebody just drops in, information has to be harvested. You've got to get information about the car. You've got to get personal information, contact information. Who are you? Where do you live? How do I get in touch with you? What's the best phone number to call? Is it okay to text? You need information about what the problem is. Why is the vehicle there? Is it normal service? When we were in the shop, we broke things down into different categories. We called them the 4 C's. Actually, 3 of them were pre-service maintenance and repair, and the 4th C was post-service maintenance repair, and that is, a customer request or a customer concern. And, the follow-up that are involved in those things. The final one is confirmation, and the cause of the problem, and the potential repair. Appointments need to be made if the vehicle isn't left for service on the spot. The appropriate technician needs to be available and assigned. Information's got to be distributed. Information is collected at the service counter, but it's useless if it's not translated or transferred into the service area so that the technician or anybody who's tasked with working on the vehicle has it available to them. And this is all much more possible. This is all much more doable today in the age of computers, laptops, tablets, cell phones, smartphones, than it was early in the 1980s or the late 70s. That information must be distributed. The vehicle's got to be inspected, or at least it should be. And by inspected, I mean not just for the problem, but fully inspected. Complete vehicle inspection is really a critical part of whatever kind of service experience you're going to have, because it's important that the shop, develops a baseline of what that vehicle is all about, where it is in its life, in its service life. The problem has to be verified in most cases if it's a mechanical problem and you have a customer concern and that's what brought it into the shop. If it's making noise or it's doing something untoward, something it's not supposed to do. Testing may be required. That testing has got to be completed and the results have got to be analyzed and evaluated. You're getting the idea that there are all of these steps involved, 10 up until evaluation if you start to diagram the way I did. And that's a lot of steps in between. And that's all before you get to a diagnosis, especially if there's a problem and you need to know what's wrong with the car. And you can't create an estimate unless or until a diagnosis has been accomplished. And that's what always bothers me when I talk to shop owners or I go into other shops and visit them, not that I have in the last year and a half or 2 years or even longer. However, but customers don't realize what these steps are because they've never been told. Nobody's ever educated them to that. And I got to tell you something, most shop owners aren't aware of it. They kind of understand that all of these things have to happen, but they think it's all part of the same process. They don't break it down. They don't recognize how discrete each element of that process can be or should be or is. And all of that happens before an estimate is created, if you want it to be an accurate estimate, certainly. So this is, and furthermore, in writing about this, I didn't really address the follow-up. Post-repair, calling the customer, making arrangements to deliver the vehicle, follow-up thank you call, follow-up call to make sure that everything's okay. So these things are all critically important. They were critically important when we developed the processes that we used at our shop. Important when I shared them with the rest of the industry, when I'd write about it. Important when I put them in the 8 volumes on shop management I created. Because there's so much at stake. There's a lot of work involved. The work is not easy. It's uncomfortable. And that's led me to another subject for another blog post about this experiment that, yes, that's one word. I made it up. And I'll explain to you what that's all about. And I think you'll enjoy it and appreciate it. It's going to make somebody very happy, one person very happy. So it's important that you understand that every bright spot, every pain point that occurs is an opportunity to really do well and soar, or an opportunity to fail miserably. The thing that's really fascinating to me is that writing about leased not owned is what freed me up, freed my mind up, freed my subconscious up enough to return to this and actually get it finished. So I guess the last line of the blog post says it all, in the respect that if at first you don't succeed, there are times it might pay to back off just a little bit to release the pressure and to examine the process, examine what it is that is happening in terms of what's supposed to happen, and then try again. It's what I did, and it worked. So until the next time, stay well, take care. Let me know how all of this works out to you, and I will be back explaining what this experiment is all about. Thank you for hanging out with me. I'd be very much interested in the processes that you've developed in your businesses, whether you own an automotive repair shop or you're doing something else. I think they're all fascinating, and I think that they're worth sharing. Thank you for hanging out.